Redemption's Crossroads, Bound for Glory, written by Reuben White. Chapter 1, Dusty Creek. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty streets of Dusty Creek. Nestled in a valley between rugged mountains, the small frontier town seemed untouched by the passage of time. Ramshackle buildings lined the main street, their wooden facades weathered by years of harsh desert winds. Among the tumbleweeds and creaking signs stood the ramshackle church, its steeple reaching towards the heavens like a weathered finger pointing the way. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and lingering prayers, the pews worn smooth by generations of faithful worshippers. It was into this quiet corner of the world that Wyatt Cassidy rode, his horse kicking up clouds of dust as they made their way through the deserted streets. With a worn Bible tucked under his arm and a weathered hat pulled low over his brow, Wyatt cut a solitary figure against the backdrop of the setting sun. The townsfolk watched in silence as Wyatt dismounted in front of the church, their eyes following him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. They knew little of the men who had come to their town, but there was something about him that stirred their souls, a sense of hope that had long been forgotten in the dust and the heat. As Wyatt stepped inside the church, the wooden doors creaking softly in protest, the air seemed to crackle with anticipation. The preacher had arrived, they whispered among themselves, his presence a beacon of light in the darkness of their lives. But little did they know that Wyatt Cassidy carried a secret with him, a burden that weighed heavy on his heart. For beneath the guise of the preacher lay the soul of a man haunted by his past, seeking redemption in the unlikeliest of places. And as the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows lengthened, Wyatt knew that his journey was only just beginning. Chapter 2, Shadows of the Past. As Wyatt Cassidy stood behind the pulpit, his voice resonating through the empty church of Dusty Creek, his mind wandered back to a time when his life was anything but holy. In the flickering candlelight, memories of his past danced before his eyes like ghosts from a bygone era. He saw himself riding with his gang, a band of outlaws feared and respected across the frontier. They were men forged in the crucible of violence, their hearts as cold as the steel of their guns. But amidst the chaos and bloodshed, there was always a flicker of humanity within Wyatt's soul. He remembered the faces of those he had wronged, the lives he had shattered with each pull of the trigger. And as the weight of his sins bore down upon him, he knew that he could no longer outrun the demons of his past. It was then that Wyatt made a choice that would alter the course of his life forever. He turned his back on the life of an outlaw, seeking solace and redemption in the teachings of the good book. But even as he sought to leave his past behind, it continued to haunt him like a relentless specter. And looming largest among the shadows was the figure of Cole, Devil Dixon, the ruthless leader of Wyatt's former gang. Cole was a man of few words but many deeds, his name whispered in fear and reverence across the frontier. He was a devil incarnate, a force of nature whose wrath knew no bounds. And now, as Wyatt stood on the precipice of redemption, he knew that he would have to confront his past and face the demons that haunted him, before they consumed him and the town of Dusty Creek along with him. Chapter 3, The Preacher's Burden. Wyatt Cassidy immersed himself fully into his role as the preacher, striving to earn the trust and respect of the townsfolk of Dusty Creek. He walked the streets, his presence a calming influence in the midst of uncertainty. He listened to the worries and fears of the people, offering words of comfort and guidance to those in need. Slowly but surely, he began to establish himself as a pillar of the community. Inside the church, Wyatt's voice rang out with a fervor born of conviction as he preached forgiveness and redemption. His sermon spoke to the hearts of the people, offering hope in the face of despair and salvation in the shadow of sin. But as Wyatt stood at the pulpit, his words echoing off the walls of the empty church, he found himself grappling with his own inner turmoil. The weight of his past sins bore down upon him like a millstone around his neck, threatening to drag him down into the depths of despair. Was he truly worthy of redemption, or was he merely a wolf in sheep's clothing, using the guise of the preacher to hide from his past? It was a question that gnawed at Wyatt's conscience, a question for which he had no easy answer. And so, as he walked the narrow path between salvation and damnation, Wyatt Cassidy found himself torn between two worlds, struggling to reconcile the man he was with the man he hoped to become. But amidst the turmoil and uncertainty, one thing remained clear: the road to redemption was a long and treacherous one, and Wyatt was determined to walk it to the very end. Chapter 4, The shadow of the past, the tranquility of Dusty Creek was shattered when the ominous silhouette of Cole, Devil, Dixon and his gang loomed on the horizon. Tension gripped the town as whispers of their arrival spread like wildfire through the dusty streets. As Cole and his men rode into town, their presence cast a pall of fear over the townsfolk. Eyes narrowed and hands instinctively reached for the comforting weight of their firearms as they braced themselves for the inevitable confrontation. Meanwhile, within the walls of the church, Wyatt Cassidy felt the chill of dread settle over him like a heavy cloak. The facade of the preacher began to crack as the truth of his past threatened to consume him. He knew that the time for hiding was over, and the reckoning he had long feared was upon him. As Cole and his gang made their presence known, the people of Dusty Creek recoiled in horror as they realized the truth about the men they had come to trust. Wyatt Cassidy was not the savior they had hoped for, but a wolf in sheep's clothing, leading them down a path of deception and betrayal. In a series of tense and heart-pounding confrontations, Wyatt faced off against his former comrades in arms, each encounter bringing him one step closer to the inevitable showdown that would determine the fate of Dusty Creek. Chapter 5, The Crucible of Conflict. In the wake of Cole, Devil, Dixon's arrival in Dusty Creek, Wyatt Cassidy found himself thrust into a crucible of conflict, torn between his past and his newfound sense of duty. With each passing day, Wyatt patrolled the streets of Dusty Creek, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. He knew that the threat posed by his former allies loomed large over the town, and he was determined to protect its inhabitants at any cost. But as tensions escalated and the specter of violence hung heavy in the air, Wyatt found himself facing internal and external pressures that threatened to overwhelm him. Doubts gnawed at his conscience like a hungry wolf, whispering words of despair and self-doubt in the quiet moments of the night. Was he truly worthy of redemption, or was he doomed to forever be defined by the sins of his past? It was a question that haunted Wyatt's every waking moment, driving him to the brink of despair as he grappled with the complexities of morality and the relentless march of time. But even in the darkest of times, there were moments of light. Small victories that served as reminders of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of hope. And as Wyatt fought to protect the town from the forces of darkness, he found strength in the bonds he had forged and the lessons he had learned along the way. For in the crucible of conflict, Wyatt Cassidy would discover the true measure of his worth, and the path to redemption would reveal itself in the most unexpected of ways. Chapter 6, Redemption's Crossroads. The tension in Dusty Creek reached its breaking point as Wyatt Cassidy and Cole, Devil, Dixon faced off in a showdown that would determine the fate of the town and its people. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty streets as Wyatt and Cole stood poised for battle. Their eyes locked in a silent exchange of defiance and determination, the weight of their shared history hanging heavy in the air. With guns drawn and hearts pounding, the two men exchanged terse words, their voices ringing out like thunder in the stillness of the desert night. And then, in a blur of motion, the gunfire erupted, filling the air with the deafening roar of bullets and the acrid scent of gunpowder. The streets of Dusty Creek became a battleground, the sounds of screams and gunfire echoing off the walls of the ramshackle buildings as Wyatt and Cole fought tooth and nail for supremacy. It was a battle of wills and wits, a clash of titans locked in a struggle for redemption and revenge. But amidst the chaos and violence, Wyatt Cassidy found clarity in the midst of the storm. In the heat of battle, he realized that vengeance would only lead to more bloodshed and suffering. With a heavy heart and a steady hand, he made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. With a final, decisive shot, Wyatt struck down Cole, Devil, Dixon, ending the conflict once and for all. And as the dust settled and the echoes of gunfire faded into the night, Wyatt knew that he had chosen the path of redemption over vengeance, embracing the light of forgiveness and leaving behind the shadows of his past. In that moment of truth, Wyatt Cassidy emerged from the crucible of conflict a changed man, his soul cleansed by the fires of redemption. And though the scars of his past would always remain, he walked away from redemption's crossroads with his head held high, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead on the journey to redemption. Chapter 7, Dusty Creek's Reckoning. In the aftermath of the showdown at Redemption's Crossroads, Dusty Creek lay silent, the echoes of gunfire fading into the desert night. The town bore the scars of the conflict, its streets littered with debris and its buildings bearing the marks of battle. As dawn broke over the horizon, the townsfolk emerged from their hiding places, their faces drawn and weary from the night's turmoil. They surveyed the damage with a mixture of relief and sorrow, grateful to have survived but mourning the losses suffered in the name of justice. Wyatt Cassidy stood amidst the wreckage, his heart heavy with the weight of his actions. He knew that the road to redemption was paved with sacrifice, but he never imagined it would come at such a cost. As the people of Dusty Creek gathered in the town square, Wyatt addressed them with a heavy heart. He spoke of the trials they had faced and the strength they had shown in the face of adversity. And though his words were few, they carried the weight of truth and sincerity. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Wyatt knew that his time in Dusty Creek had come to an end. With a heavy heart and a silent prayer on his lips, he bid farewell to the town and its residents, promising to carry their courage and resilience with him on his journey. As he rode out of Dusty Creek, the sun at his back and the wind in his hair, Wyatt knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous. But he also knew that he was not alone, that the bonds he had forged in the crucible of conflict would guide him through the darkest of times. And so, with hope in his heart and determination in his soul, Wyatt Cassidy continued on his journey, carrying the burden of his past while seeking a new beginning in the vast expanse of the American West. Chapter 8: Trails of Redemption. As Wyatt Cassidy rode off into the sunset, the desert stretched out before him like an endless sea of sand and sky. The rhythmic beat of his horses' hooves echoed in the silence of the desert, a steady reminder of the journey that lay ahead. In the fading light of day, Wyatt found himself lost in thought, reflecting on the events that had brought him to this moment. He thought of the battles he had fought, both internal and external, and the choices he had made along the way. But amidst the shadows of his past, there was also a glimmer of hope, a sense of purpose that burned bright in his heart. For Wyatt knew that redemption was not a destination, but a journey, and he was determined to see it through to the end. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, Wyatt felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he also knew that he was not alone. For in the bonds he had forged and the lessons he had learned, Wyatt found the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And though the path to redemption would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, he rode on with a steadfast resolve, ready to confront the demons of his past and embrace the promise of a new beginning. And so, as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky and the moon cast its gentle glow upon the desert, Wyatt Cassidy continued on his journey, a lone figure riding into the unknown, his future as vast and boundless as the open plains before him. But as the winds whispered secrets of adventures yet to come, one thing remained certain: wherever the road may lead, Wyatt Cassidy would walk it with courage, conviction, and the unwavering belief that redemption was always within reach, for those who dared to seek it. If you are enjoying the Mystery Within channel, hit the subscribe, follow, or like buttons for future posts.